Face Value, in collaboration with African Media Association, Migrants Commission, and 103 Malta's Heart.
Hi, I am Rachel.
And I am Elena.
Welcome to Face Value, a program to explore relationship of different nationalities living in Malta. We have today in the studio with us
Katel
and
Jean-Paul Boch.
Today we will have these two guests and we'll be talking about how they connected and developed their relationship through their activities in migration and their professions. And can we meet you?
So I'm Jean-Paul. I'm a cultural organizer at the National Book Council currently. Before I was coordinator for the Malta Mediterranean Literature Festival organized by Inizjamed. At the moment, I'm also running the project Niġru Ġrajja, which is run by Inizjamed, which is part of the Premju tal-President tal-Kreattività project, which is supported by the Arts Council of Malta.
Interesting.
So I'm Katel. I'm French. You will notice it with my accent. And I have Maltese roots from my father. So I am an artist. I came to Malta in 2016. I decided to come to Malta also to know more about the country I belong to, and not just as a tourist or like this. And it was also for me the opportunity to start my career as an artist. In the past, I used to be a project manager, UX designer. So Malta gave me a lot of opportunity to exhibit my work, and I'm sure we're gonna speak about it.
That. Definitely. I was going to say all that.
You were mentioning Maltese roots. Have you, your grandparents or your parents used to live in Malta? Or have you always lived in France before this?
When I was a child, I used to visit my grandparents who used to live here in Malta.
Okay.
But they spent a long time in Tunisia. We call them Maltese from Tunisia.
Interesting.
And after the independence of Tunisia, my grandfather decided to go back to Malta instead of going to France or UK like most of the Maltese who used to live there. It was at this time the Maltese community in Tunisia was quite huge.
Oh wow!
And so they decided to come back to Malta, and then after a few years here, they found some difficulties, so they decided to move to France to join some family members in Marseille, and unfortunately it was difficult also there in France, so they decided to go back to Malta again. And they spend the rest of their life here in Malta.
And you also work in the field of migration.
Yeah, and this story I just told you about the family migration. It's a part of one of my biggest projects, and it was an exhibition I present at Spazio Creative in September 2021.
Don't let the cat out of the bag yet. Just okay. Don't let it. It is quite interesting your roots and all the ancestors. So 2016 was not your first year of coming to Malta. You visited in the past as a child.
Yes, many times. Oh, many times. Not so much, but yes. Because at this time, traveling was quite expensive and not easier as today. But
you were visiting from where?
From France, from Brittany, and they were just flies once a week from Paris to Malta. Okay. So imagine it was not like one fly every day or two fly, and it was a bit more expensive. Yeah.
Wow. Jean-Paul, can you tell us how you met?
Katel, I think the very first time we met, it was during the Malta Mediterranean Literature Festival, no? So
2015.
We had a common friend,
What year was that?
Sorry?
What year?
The first time we met, I think 2015, Katel,
Yes,
before you actually moved
So
here.
before you moved here.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, I mean, the cultural scene in Malta, you tend to bump into the same people
It's a small
quite a
network.
few times. It's unfortunately, yes, it's a very small or luckily maybe, I don't know. Yes, and we met, and then we realized we have a lot of things in common.
Yes.
One thing came to the next, and the next thing we were living together, and we became
It sounds like it happened from one day to the other.
You missed some
Incontrollable.
days.
Tell us the
You
details.
missed some
Okay. So give us the details then, since you missed some.
He just skipped from A to point Z.
No, but it's true. I mean, we bump up many times, and once I invite him because I was part of the festival in Slima, and I didn't know so many people, so I invite all people who I know. And Jeanne came for this festival, and he realized I work with the subject of migration, and at this time I didn't speak so well English, so we didn't communicate so much. So he didn't know before I work on that.
And also
subject.
at that time I was very active at Integra. Basically I spent, I think, almost 9 years teaching Maltese to migrants, mostly asylum seekers. So obviously I still have a lot of friends. I meet a lot of people from the migration community. I mean, my girlfriend is a migrant, of course. Katel has a different reality. Maybe she would be the first to admit that she's got a much more privileged status in Malta. Because yes, I think we have to admit that some people are more privileged than others, and it's just a question of luck. So yes, and also since then, I think the subject of the theme of migration got ingrained in me, and also I think, my second publication, which was a collection of short stories, and it's got the title it's called Mushnis, which is like. It's difficult to translate. It's like unhuman, but it's more like how it's said so freely in Malta, not really in a migration team, and it evolves around the story of a migrant. Yes.
I've been grappling with that, about the whole concept of migrants. I'm having a bit of a hard time understanding how I feel towards that term, because I've been involved in this field for the past year, more on a studying level. But as you said, technically we all qualify as migrants. I qualify as migrant as well, but you're not what comes to mind in the visual when you would imagine what a migrant is. And when you talk about foreigners, I've done also a lot of experiences abroad. I've always said expat. If you're talking about Europe, it's expat. Even when you're abroad and you're outside of Europe, if you're European, you're saying expat, you will never say migrant. So it's interesting. These definitions have gotten such a big connotation and such a big value attached to them so, it's very generalized. So I have a hard time understanding. I feel a bit uncomfortable, I'm noticing.
Yes, that is because you are a professional. I did a lot of study in that field. I would like to know, what was the impression of people around you when both of you became partners, or you became, what was the impression of people around you?
For example, from my family side, how do I say? I imagine my mother always dreamt of me having a Maltese girlfriend. She never. She comes from a generation which comes from a very big family, rarely ventured out of Malta. But I think Katel can say more than me. She accepts Katel a lot, But once again, I think the biggest difference is, once again, it's a question of privilege. Katel hasn't got any issues. She's got a passport. She can travel very easily. She can work very easily in Malta. I think actually she's got a special in art. Maybe she gets some opportunities that maybe are more difficult in France than in here. No.
And what was the impression of your family, especially because you have Maltese roots?
Yeah, I mean, I think my family was not so surprised.
Yes, it's like coming back home.
No, I mean, they didn't feel there is a difference between, I mean, my mother was French and my dad was Maltese. So, and in my family, I have a French uncle married with a Spanish woman. So not, we are aware of this mix.
I would like to take John on the last statement and some of the points that you have raised about privileges. Would you think that privileges is responsible for the perception of migrants in Malta? Like, you were saying that she has passport, she could work, so it's not like a parasitic kind of relationship. People could see that, yes, it's not like philanthropic, like you are helping her, you are helping him, that kind of a relationship. Would you say that privilege reflects or affects the way people perceive migrants?
Definitely. First of all, there's a lot of things that we take for granted. And we think of them as natural when they are not natural at all. Starting from borders or passport. I remember, now it's a few years ago, a friend of mine, he's a very accomplished poet, Antoine Cassar, had this poem which was published on a sort of a passport, but was an anti-passport.
I remember that, yeah.
Okay. Now, for me, it's natural to, as soon as the passport expires, I go and
renew it.
Yes.
It's the least thing I ever worry about. But for some people, it's a really, really probably the bane of their life, no? So yes, and also myself, okay, I live in an island, and even some things were not, for example, when I speak to the younger generation, which they take travel so for granted, for me it was really something, I'm 42. I mean, when I was young, I never really traveled. It was quite a middle-class experience, and I'm not telling you I come from a poor family, but it was from a family that travel was seen as a luxury.
Yes.
That was a privilege that I didn't have. Nowadays, I have the privilege, almost the right, something which I take for granted, that every now and then I go to the airport, get a flight, and go quite far away.
Yes. What is the message in your literature, the kind of literature you do? What is the message?
I hate to use the word message, to be honest.
This is an episode about discussions on terms, I fear, which is very important.
I hope I'm not didactic in my personally, even though probably I want to sound sophisticated when I say I don't have a message, but probably there is something at the back of your mind that's going there. So yes, so when I write, I think I want to provide a perspective that's maybe not so natural for others. So yes, I want to show a situation from a different perspective. Because after all, why do you write? You write because you're never innocent, you're never unbiased when you write. Of course, I have an agenda when I write. And whoever says he or she doesn't have an agenda, probably is unaware of his or her own agenda. What I try to do, whether I succeed or not, that's another story, provide a perspective from a different point of view.
Interesting.
I try to defamiliarize the everyday life, basically.
Interesting. We'll be learning more about that in a short break. We'll take a break. We will see you back with Face Value on 103 Malta's Heart.
Face Value, in collaboration with African Media Association, Migrants Commission, and 103 Malta's Heart.
Today we're joined by Jean-Paul and Katel, and we were talking about how they came to know about each other's work and in general their interest about migration. We were just speaking with Jean-Paul about also the definitions of terms and the privileges that come from what we perceive as migrants. Also, what I understood was different perceptions between the Maltese generation as such, about having the opportunity and having the privilege to travel compared to before. But can I ask you, how did your interest in migration start? Was it through your volunteering experience that you were saying?
I think how it started, probably like many other things, was almost by accident. Basically, I was at a stage in my life where I said I should give some of my time to others. I've met a friend at that time. Integra needed teachers, and I said, why not? And how was it? Yes, and from a course which was meant to be just 10 weeks, it ended taking years and
10
years.
years.
Sadly.
Yes,
Exactly.
So I'm guessing it was a good experience.
absolutely.
But did it come
Wow.
with any kind of culture shocks in a sense? Was it the first time that
More
you
than a
went through-
culture shock, I think I realized my privileges, to be honest. I know I'm talking about privilege. Yeah, but I realized how lucky I am. Yes, that was one thing. Also, lately, sometimes, yes, that is all. Rather than culture shocks, there are sometimes disappointments, but that's all the time in life, in the sense that you have something, you really believe in it, and you expect people to buy it immediately. But that's maybe,
We've talked about that.
but maybe that's, I am very, very afraid that
Yeah.
I get almost like a colonial mentality.
No. Hold it right there, because that
Hitting
is,
it on the nail. Really.
that is my experience as well. We'll come back to that. Katel, tell us, how did you get into migration?
I through my family story first of all, and I was when I was a kid, I was really proud of what my family has done as traveling to a place to another. I didn't at this age. You don't know how it can be painful, suffering, and etc. And lately, I knew more about that, and also. I think in my artwork, when I spoke about migration, I really want to focus on what's happened in the past and now in the present, because they are like it's a wheel and it's going back again and again, and we don't learn from the past. And especially migration, Malta, Tunis. I mean, today. Before it was the Maltese who want to reach Tunisia, and now it's the other way.
So interesting.
And
True.
and
So your art is your message or your
message you can say
exactly true. I don't want to. Your message in migration or your ideas in migration are expressed through your art. So you express it. So art is like your own form of expression in the field of migration.
Yeah, it's the main theme of my work. Yes, and I have different. I use photography or videos and installation, but yes, it's always somewhere.
It's interesting because when we talk about migration, migrants, and all those things, people always think it's always philanthropic. So you are always trying to help. So in your case, it's like you're expressing yourself. You are showcasing the realities and the journeys, right?
You
Yes.
mean aid through the lens of charity?
Yes. When it's always seen through the lens of charity when we talk
Yeah.
about migration. What comes to mind to some people is like, if you say you're working in the field of migration, you go to this sea to help people, things like that.
There is a very paternalistic tone that
Absolutely,
comes
yeah.
when you find yourself in circumstances where, through no fault of your own, ironically, you are in a position that is better than the other person that quote unquote you're helping. And so you feel that even the tiniest work that you're doing is something that, but at least I am doing X. And I feel like this is something I'm feeling very conflicted with lately because you could have been in that position as well. Everyone could have been in that position. So it seems that then it's really hard to put into words, but you kind of, your experience and your contentment is limited to something that if that aid were given to you in that manner, you wouldn't feel that is enough or that is dignified. So is that something that you have noticed maybe in works that in your art maybe or in other people's art? And is that something that you had tried to translate differently? Like, it's ironic because you're doing a work on migration as a migrant as well.
What I try to do is like a bit like Jeanne. I try to give another perspective and from the eyes of the people themselves, but not as a documentary. More like people can relate to their story or the story of family members, and I try to have different view, and I mean sometimes people are attracted because in my installation there is an object remind their story, but then they will go to all the process of the artwork and they will say, it happened this and this, and they know a bit more about the migration journey.
Do you have exhibitions with people in your field, people who use photography to talk about migration as well?
Sorry?
So do you have exhibition where people will talk about migration through photography? Do you have something like that?
The first project I exhibit in Malta, it was Famiglia Migrazioni, and it was a project with 32 portraits of migrants I met. So it was photography and writing, and they come from different countries, and but they have relation with Malta or France, and they are the different ages. The youngest 14 and the eldest 102. Wow. And they,
Wow.
and different background, but to show migration, it's not just the migrant on the boat. We are all migrant, or we can have a family member who is also a migrant. So why we have so nice, so different between those people? We are. I mean, like Jeanne say, some are privileged and other are less. But why we are so we feel anger or angry
when we meet some.
Yeah.
John, do you used to teach Maltese?
Excuse me?
Do you used to teach Maltese now?
At the moment, no. I stopped for a while. Yeah.
So it was Maltese, not English.
No, it was Maltese. My passion is Maltese language. to be fair.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I can imagine that experience must be also a bit frustrating because it's hard also to teach Maltese. I mean, I still don't even know it that well myself, but because you said that sometimes through your work and through your volunteering, you would have wanted things to go a specific way, and maybe things didn't always work out as it was. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, but that probably, I think when you're doing volunteering or when you're working in something, you have this idea in your mind that you want to pass over to others, and you almost in a paternalistic way, you expect people to just listen from you, make all the effort, But maybe you're not
You
actually.
said, you're making some faces right
I
now,
want
Katel.
to just add, no, not on paternalism or something, but I want to add something because of privilege and languages. And this is, for me, it's really important. And if I leave the studio without saying, I will feel a bit. No, I mean, when I arrived in Malta, I didn't speak well English and I didn't know any words in Maltese because I...
And now?
נפهم فتيت ونتكلم فتيت. But
Slowly.
but our people look at me as a French. They say, "Oh, you will learn quickly and and you will." But it's difficult to learn a language, and I have the privilege to be French, and because I have Maltese roots, I can also have the Maltese passport. But I was feeling for long. I was feeling outside, and even if when I was in France, I consider myself half Maltese as
Was
French.
it because of the language?
Yes, definitely. And
And
the
I
language
think
is
the language plays a gigantic
Yes,
role. I
I
have the
mean,
same experience.
I have the experience of going to France from time to time, and I only studied French as a student at the secondary school.
How many years ago?
So basically, my French is not very good, and lately I had to return to it. And
had
yes,
to return to
I love languages, but yes, when you don't know the language, you're automatically feeling an outsider, I think.
yes, and
Definitely,
I
we're talking about
and
this as well.
and I
I mean,
just
I cannot imagine myself if not knowing English. I would be in this program. Let's be honest.
We also
So
spoke about how if you get into a room and you say something like bonjour, and
Yeah,
how
they had
it
mentioned
changes
in one of the
the-
interviews we
yes,
had. It's
yes, changes
little
the
things that
atmosphere.
really makes the difference because you will always be perceived as something that's not. I mean, the language legitimizes everything.
and the student of Jeanne, I mean, I follow few lessons with Jeanne, and we have good friends now.
So you
it
can
was-
tell us, is he a good teacher?
Yeah, yes, and but for I am in Malta for 7 years now, and I have more than time to apply to be a Maltese citizen. But I didn't do it before because I was feeling really guilty because some of the students or friends now they are here for 13 or 15 years. They speak really well Maltese and they still don't have protection. And I mean, it's really
It feels a bit like a slap in the face.
yes, and I feel like I'm going to have a Maltese passport and not them, and they speak a better Maltese than me. They work, they pay taxes and things like that, but we don't protect them.
On the one hand, your experience is your experience, and it shouldn't be something that can be equated to that. I can understand it is a point of reflection for sure, because you think, well, just for the sake, I have not lived here until then, and now I have the opportunity to do this, and I can apply for this, and you see that people who technically are going through the same thing that you're going through, they're struggling so much more to be able to have those privileges and advantages. But I think I think there's a bit of both. I also felt, sometimes I feel that because I'm Maltese and Italian, so it feels like you can never fully identify with one thing. And knowing and not knowing the language, I can understand Maltese fully, but speaking it, I never did because it was the thing I was most shy for and everything. It feels like those are litmus tests that legitimize your belonging. If belonging is another very loaded term, but how Maltese are you? Are you really this? Are you really that? Are you fully this? It feels that then at a certain point you're not really part of anything. And to be honest, even in France, it's more or less the same thing.
Yes, yes.
Like I was in France as well. Knowing French is fundamental to be able to be considered that way. Because they're saying you're in our country, we speak French, you have to speak French, which to be honest, to a certain extent, I understand because it's true. It's part of your national identity. So it's interesting for Malta. There's the fact that it's a bilingual country,
Yeah.
and so you can
even though it is still
get away, use
a
another language.
bilingual country, I would like to know the opinion of June on language as an integral part of culture, not just for migrants and even the locals themselves. What's the perception of this? Do you feel that the people are drawing away from the language, or?
I think, first of all, because this is something, let me almost, it's a caveat, how would I say? Maltese is my personal passion, so I might be a bit biased in this. First of all, as much as I love Maltese, I also use English all the time. I also try to learn new languages. In the meantime, I try to learn French, I try to learn Spanish. So, first of all, I'm not one that say if you learn one language, you wouldn't, you would unlearn another language. For me, it's really actually, the more languages you know, the better.
Global you become.
The more multilingual you become.
Yes.
In reality, for example, I think Malta is passing through a stage that it was almost one of my frustrations when teaching, is that you're trying to teach a language to people who are actually living in that country. So they should have a lot of opportunity to practice it. But unfortunately, many times they worked in certain jobs that they're all foreigners themselves, so they didn't have that opportunity to use the language.
So it's only in the classroom.
So it was only in the classroom. And you can tell between someone who used the language and in real life and someone that didn't. For example, one of my biggest difficulties in learning French is that, okay, I get obsessed by it from time to time. I do a lot of courses online and notes. Sometimes I try to speak to Katel.
I would hold you on that. I would hold you on that, because coming back to privileges again, you learn it from the classroom.
We just call this episode privileges.
Exactly. You learn it from the classroom, and you also have the privilege to practice in real life.
Yeah, but it's still different. I mean, first of all, for example, what happened to me in Christmas, I thought I know this, but then you go in the real life.
Okay.
Even you're trying to speak and nobody understanding you because your accent is not so refined.
I would like to know that experience. So now we are going to take a break, and when we'll come back, we'll continue from where we stop. This is still Face Value on 103 Malta's Heart.
Face Value, in collaboration with African Media Association, Migrants Commission, and 103 Malta's Heart.
Hello everyone, we're back on Face Value with Rachel and our guests Jean-Paul and Katel, and we're talking about the realities of migration and their perspective in this field. Specifically now we were delving a bit more into the importance and the cultural identity of language and of Maltese. And before getting to the guests, I actually wanted to ask you, Rachel, what was your experience with learning Maltese? It's part of also applying for the visa as such, right?
It's part of what?
It's part also of the process for the visa, if I'm not mistaken?
No, not the visa exactly. So it has to do with, for me, my motivation of the reason why I had to learn at that time, because I started learning with it the second month or the third month. I registered the second month when I got to Malta, because I had wanted to work in the ministry, and one of the criteria is that you had to be able to speak the language. And coming from my background, I have a background in the environment, so I felt that it is really good for me to be able to speak the language. I also discovered that it is easier for me to interact with people, like to really get into the society, even though I don't have the asylum seeker or the refugee status. But it will also give me that chance to interact more with people and to get better relationship with the locals. So I started the first level, and that is where I am right now. So we were talking about your experience, your perception about the language as a part of culture. What do you think about language as a part of culture from the perspective of migrants and from the perspective of locals themselves?
First of all, I think a language is integral of culture, and also, even as much as we are bilingual, personally, whether I speak Maltese or in English, it's almost a political decision. Some people maybe I mean, even if you go back to Maltese history, even if you look at the two big parties, one party was very pro-Italian, another was more pro-British. So a language, as much as it is, we take it for granted, what we use, it's very politically loaded. Nowadays in Malta, probably at times whether you use Maltese or English, it's almost a class thing. Definitely. So yes. As for migrants, first of all, I think in a way Malta, I think the Maltese language is facing the challenge for the first time to be taught to foreigners. Because 20 years ago, nobody ever thought of teaching Maltese as a foreign language. This is something quite new for us. So yes, probably, even though you might tell me there's been 20 years, 20 years in culture is not really a long time in reality. And I think also maybe from a political perspective, not enough has been done to make life easier to our migrants, any type of migrants, from a language perspective. Also, probably being a bilingual country, let's be honest, a lot of foreigners probably are a bit, find it very convenient to just learn English, because yes, myself, for example, probably Katel can tell you, if we're in a group and most of us are Maltese and there's a couple of foreigners, we tend to automatically
and I have
speak English.
I have to push them and
in
say,
many
no,
other
please
countries,
speak
it doesn't
To be
happen.
honest, I
let's
have
be
the same
honest.
experience. So
In many
like
other countries, probably it doesn't happen. Let's be fair.
it's a perception thing. It's like there's a mental block, because every time I also say please continue and I understand, and I will just reply in English, and it seems like if you're used to always doing it in one way. I notice also for me, for Maltese, if I know that someone is much more comfortable speaking in Maltese, it's the only moment in which I feel forced to really try.
Yes.
But if I know that someone has a perfect knowledge of English and Maltese, it just feels automatic and natural to switch to English. This the bilingualism.
And if in a group they continue to speak in English, I can improve my Maltese.
Exactly.
So from the end of this episode, no more English. Bye.
I would win every argument.
Yes, because you are the expert here.
Killing two birds with one stone, you're good to go. It's fine.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Katel, because you had mentioned that you had the opportunity to come to Malta also when you were younger, and to know the experience of migration also through your grandparents. I can imagine that the idea and how you remembered Malta as a child then was very different to your experience and actually living here. Can you tell us a bit more about that? If there were any moments where there were things that just caught you by surprise, maybe, about Malta and culture?
To be honest, when I arrive, I feel at home in Malta because I travel quite a lot before to move, and I saw some change. But yes, what is the shock? The big shock was the how it's built and things like that. It changed a lot for me, and I remember I told to my friend, I don't mind if the roads are a bit not completely flat or a bit bumpy, and it's part of the country and things like that. But nowadays they are all flat, but it's good also. And I admit it's good, but the flyover, it's a bit too much. and what I feel a bit, I mean, it's a culture shock, or maybe. I don't know how to say, but I feel like it's always, I compare often the past and the present, but there were some things we did we didn't do well, and we repeat them again. And I mean, here in Malta, we have it's the opportunity to build a country safe and for the environment, etc. But I have the impression we do it in the wrong way. We would give all the privilege to the cars, and when we could because we build the new road and etc. We should think first to
The environment, the pedestrian, the bicycle, all these things, and then the cars at the end, the public transport, and the car at the end, and not giving. I mean, building bridge for the pedestrian when it's hot and you should just cross the street. You have to climb stairs like 2 or 3 floors, walk across the street, and go down. This is for me. It's kind of culture shock because the way of thinking it's car first, and this is for me it's a bit. I wanted to know, in 2016 when you moved here, did you have it in mind to move here permanently?
I didn't say that to my mom, but yes, it was in my mind to stay longer. I told her I stay for 8 months, 1 year, maybe, but in my mind, I say...
And now it's over.
Yes. In my mind, it was more than 1 year, definitely.
And so what are you working on currently? Project, exhibitions,
yes, I work on different workshops, like I did with last year with Refugee Week Festival, and I have an exhibition in Paris about migration, and this project was
is it solo, just you, or you and John? Is it just you or both of you?
No, just me, me. And it was a photography installation I made at Il Camratafu in Malta in 2021. And now it's in Paris and in the festival Circulation until 21st May. So this is a tackle again migration. It's an installation in the dark, and I am also a diver, so I like to under the water. I like to take photo of the landscape and the materiality of the water. So I have a collection of more than 100 photos of bubble of divers, and so I put them all over the place, in the ceiling and the wall, and I drew the coastline of Libya, Tunisia, and Malta. And those photos, in fact, are places where people die in the sea when they cross the Mediterranean. So the size of the photo is according to the number of people
who have died.
And it's the record made by the NGO IOM. The project Missing Migrant. I was inspired by those data. So there we spoke about shock, and I mean the people who visit the exhibition at first, they feel like, wow, it's beautiful. It's something a bit yes, it's beautiful in a way because it's like stars and the Milky Way, but then they have a big shock when they realize what they are looking at
behind it.
Yes.
Wow. Yes. Interesting. It's almost like I'm seeing that a lot also through the work that I think I've seen some of the work that you had done, that you had given the opportunity for people to express their own creativity and do their own work and art. I had seen some paintings and they were really, really beautiful. I adored that. It's an evolution, in a sense, you would say, about advocacy. It's a new type of advocacy that is done through art. I wanted to ask Jean-Paul, has the work of Katel and her involvement in the field of art, and yours is more towards culture, but in another sense, has it influenced your perception of how these can be also good ways of sending the same message, or maybe they're more compelling than other forms of art?
Probably the great thing about art is, which maybe news can never achieve, that art can feel more personal, and it can move people much more than a bulletin of news can do. And probably Katel, with her investment in her life, in herself, and her in her art, because Katel, to do the art and to how do I say, to present this cultural this migration perspective, gave up other work. I think it's really fundamental for others to understand more the migration theme. My only sometimes worry, even from my own, whenever I do something myself, is that when you do these things, you're preaching to the converted. So
same audience.
Damn.
yeah,
Very effective.
but
sentence.
actually, you have to start from somewhere. So
yeah,
you
I
can
have seen
always say, "But I'm only getting this far. I'm only getting this far." But I think the secret of something is that you persist.
Because I think you get to see that as well, given that you work also in this field. Do you feel that it always stays in the same niche and group of people?
Yes, once in a while you get new faces, but over time the same audience repeatedly, and in fact, organizations are beginning to say that yes, this message, we repeat this message, and it's still the same group of audience, it's still the same group of people having this discussion, showing their works, discussing this narrative. So, but like you said, it's persistence. Once in a while you get a handful of people who are not the regulars, and those are the ones.
And sometimes you are touching people without knowing. Right?
Yes, exactly. So those are the new converts. And sometimes you get this satisfaction that, okay, we are making progress slowly.
One more down.
Yes,
Yeah, and I think if each person in this niche has the idea to come with someone is not in the niche each time, or not each time, but sometime bring someone who is not in the niche with them, it will also grow up the niche.
Yes, exactly. True. I agree with you.
We're coming towards the end of the show. I wanted to ask you, is there any way you wish or you hope that the conversation around migration can change? The way that maybe it's communicated, the kind of art that can be done, or the kind of way that it can reach out and branch out to people that are outside of this quote-unquote bubble, you can call it?
I think we would succeed if we just deter migration almost disappear, because that would mean, first of all, a migrant is many more things apart from being a migrant. A migrant can be a father, can be a mother, can be a son, can be an artist. I mean, hopefully we don't need to talk about it that much.
As if it were assimilated into the identity.
It becomes so assimilated in us. Probably in some spheres we actually succeeded, but until then we just work on it.
Katel?
Yeah, and like I just mentioned, I think if we bring people who are not in the field, or even, I mean, I like the idea of mixing people. So, yes, just if we know more each other, if we manage to have more events where migrants are with locals, and we try to build some project like that, who we meet more, then we don't see the other like migrants anymore.
Exactly. So the message from this episode will be that see the next person like a person, whether migrant or local. You see the person from the perspective of either your father, your mother, gender, person, a professional whatsoever. It has been an interesting conversation so
Then
far. It
also
has been-
cancel the word
Yes,
migration
yes.
and check your privilege.
Exactly. Check
Thank
your
you so much
privilege.
for joining us on
Yes,
this
yes.
episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
so
It's been
much.
wonderful having you. So we have come to the end of this episode. We have been speaking with John, and we have been speaking also with Katel, with me and Elena and myself. See you again on the next episode on Face Value. Please follow us on all our social media platforms: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. See you on the next episode.
See you next time.
Face Value, in collaboration with African Media Association, Migrants Commission, and 103 Malta's Heart.